was not one that would generate many memories of Santa at all. The tree or any presents around it. That just did not happen in our house. Because you see, we were poor. We couldn't do the things that some of the other people did. We didn't have any of the things that other people had. But I had something that some other people don't have. And I had an absolutely fantastic mother. The bright side of Christmas was that we celebrated the birth of Christ. The presents were the ones that the wise men later gave to the baby Jesus. That and the reason for Jesus coming was the stories that my mom always told us about life and about times. And this Christmas meant story time. So Mom's teaching were from her four famous writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I'm going to take you on a trip that my mom took us when I was very young. As it says in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, Joseph and Mary, along with hundreds and hundreds of others from Galilee and the town of Nazareth, had to make a journey to their place of birth. In Joseph's case, this meant traveling to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. My mom said, you know, that sounds simple enough until you think about what it was like for them to make that trip, especially with Mary being very, very pregnant. Mom said we had to close our eyes and visualize. She said, you know, there was no roads to speak of, no Department of Public Works to fix them if they had them. The roads were nothing more than paths that had been worn down by people traveling to different places. So this trip was going to be difficult. There were no streetlights. They were going to have to cross three mountains, Mount Gilboa, Mount Ebal, and Mount Jerem, each with their own treacherous gullies and streams that they had to cross. There were no hotels, motels, rest stops along the way. They had no Howard Johnsons they could stop at and get something to eat. Now, these roads were also known to have robbers and thugs along the way, just waiting for travelers to come along that they could rob and steal things from, not to mention the wild animals. The whole trip was going to be about 100 miles. Now, 100 miles doesn't sound like much, but they are traveling on foot, and when they can, by donkey. I can just imagine if you women stopped and imagined yourself being 9 months pregnant, almost ready to deliver a baby, and you got to walk or ride on a mule 100 miles over some of the roughest terrain you could possibly think of. That gives you just an idea of what it was like for Mary. There would be hundreds of people on the road coming and going, everybody trying to go and get where they wanted to go in this rush that they had to go and be recognized or known that they were there, and it was all done in the wonderful word of taxes, because Herod wanted to make sure he knew everybody paid their taxes. Now, here again, you've got this pregnant woman on this trip. Everybody's in a hurry. Nobody is there to take time to care for a pregnant woman. She had Joseph, and that was it. Her and Joseph. So as kids, we'd sit around our Christmas tree, trimmed with popcorn and cranberries, because we didn't have a lot of the other things people put on trees. And she would tell us that story, that journey. And this is the journey that they took. With hundreds of others, they had packed what they thought they felt they needed for this trip, a trip of 100 miles. That would take several days. They had to pack all of the food, water, pots and pans and shelter, whatever it was. Mary would have to walk most of the way. This was just not going to be an easy trip. When they first set out, they were in a large caravan of people all headed to different towns and cities. There would be a lot of company, so they thought, but Mary had to make the rest stops. And every time she made a rest stop, the others kept on going. As night came, they would set up their camp and go to bed, only to rise early, eat and pack up and be on the road again day after day, struggling over the rocks, ruts in the roads, climbing the trails over the mountains, and every time Mary had to stop to rest, the others kept going. Day after day, night after night, take the supplies off the donkey, make a fire so they could cook their meal, spread some cloths on the ground so they would have a place to sleep. At least at this time they didn't have rain to contend with, which was good because all they had was one tarp and a few sticks that they could use to prop it up and keep it over them in case it did. Now, sure, there was people that they could talk to for a while, but most of them steered clear because they didn't want to be bothered with a pregnant woman, afraid they would be asked to help. She struggled as best she could to help Joseph with the setup and takedowns every day, fixing meals, taking care of the donkey. But this was an enormous task for all of those that were not with child. So you can imagine what it was for Mary. As they traveled along, the caravan kept changing. Someday there was a few others that might join them, but then there was more that would leave. Every time they stopped at night, they had to worry, because this meant they were in more danger, because the robbers would not attack the large caravan, but small ones were easy pickings. In fact, this meant that it would not be long before they would probably be alone on that trip, because no one waited to help. This also meant the protection from thieves or wild animals. No men carrying lanterns to light the way, so they must stop and set up camp earlier than usual. When they were just a couple of days from Bethlehem, Joseph made the decision that they must push on even through the night, or Mary would not make it. She had endured much, and Joseph was afraid that she would go into labor and there would be nothing for Mary. This was a dangerous decision, because traveling at night, trying to keep up the others in a caravan with only one small lantern that only lit the trail up a couple of feet ahead of them, they would make it impossible for them to see any dangers that they were facing. The further they went, the more tired that Mary got. Joseph insisted that she try riding on that donkey. And so she did for a while. Ladies, can you imagine out in the wilderness, going to have a baby in 2 or 3 days, and the only help you have is your husband, who had to do all the work, walk and carry some of the supplies so that you could ride on that donkey? God really picked the right man to be Mary's husband. Then one night they went to bed only to find in the morning that they were alone. There was no one else with them. The trip was becoming harder and harder for Mary. She had to stop many times to rest because of the pain. So here they are, 2 people alone, traveling up and down a mountain, struggling to push on, and night was beginning to fall. Joseph is starting to have second thoughts about trying to push ahead, but then a star in the sky appeared. It was brighter than any other star that they had ever seen. And he had these rays of light that were coming down from that star. Then it happened. A miracle. One of those rays of light beamed down right on the trail in front of them and lit up that trail for hundreds of feet on both sides and in front of them. But Mary still had to make many stops. And when they would take a short nap, they would get up and continue on. Mary was getting more and more uncomfortable. Joseph knew it would not be much longer, so he pushed on. At this point, Mary was able to ride more of the time on the donkey as their supplies were almost gone. Night again was falling. That same star in the east, it shone down on them. It was that star that led them right to the entrance of Bethlehem. They had made the trip to salvation. At that, Mom would sit down at the piano, played an old tune, Old Little Town of Bethlehem. So right now, I want you to make an old pastor happy, and we're all going to sing Little Town of Bethlehem. Okay, we've got them to Bethlehem. Now what's next? Oh yeah, they need a place to stay, don't they? Well, my mother went on. She said when Mary and Joseph arrived, they began looking for a place to stay. Joseph began knocking on doors as they went down the streets, knocking on houses, asking for a place to stay. In every place, the answer was the same. We don't have any room. They knocked and knocked, door after door after door, along those streets. When Joseph finally came to the end, the door was locked. He knocked several times. He could hear people in there moving about and talking. So he began banging on the door and yelling to let them in. Finally, the innkeeper came to the door and shouted, "We have no room." Joseph begged the innkeeper, could they even have a place on the floor? That Mary was soon to have her baby and they needed shelter. The innkeeper said he did not even have a place on the floor with so many people arriving from the census. Joseph continued to beg and plead. "Please, sir, I must have a place for my wife." The innkeeper looked at Joseph and then at Mary. His heart softened. He said, "I have a barn out and back with stalls for my animals." He said, "You can go in there. You'll be warm because of the animals. And I will make sure that if anybody else comes knocking on the door, I won't send them there so that you will have privacy." Joseph thanked him. Mary and him As they went to the door, the barn, it was dark, almost total darkness. But when they opened that door, there was a moment, a light from that same star came down from the hole in the roof, and it shone right on the baby's spot where he was going to be. Mary went and prepared a place for the baby Jesus. Fresh straw blankets. It was only minutes later, Mary told Joseph she was going to have that baby. And at that time, all the animals settled down. Mary quietly delivered the baby. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes. She laid him in that manger, and he slept. And every animal in there was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. And it looked like some of the animals were actually kneeling down. And that light from that star shone down on the baby. And at that point, Mom played Away in a Manger. And we're all going to sing that one. When we finished speaking, Mom would pick up her worn Bible and she'd read. And in the same country, shepherds abiding in their fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them. The glory of the Lord shone around about them, and they were sore afraid. The angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you today is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. You shall find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And suddenly a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go on to Bethlehem, and see the thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known. They came with haste, and they found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in that manger. When they had seen it, they made known about the saying which was told to them concerning the child. Now I remember being an older brother. I said to my sister, oh yes. And then the wise men came and gave the gifts, and Mom corrected me. She said, oh no, they didn't. They didn't come until later. I always get a kick out of it when I see the camel and the three wise men at the crèche, because they weren't there. Now, in response this morning about the wise men that Dr. Mike read about, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, they came, the wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, there is born King of the Jews. For we've seen his star in the east, we've come to worship him. Sure, King Herod gave a good story, but he didn't know just how wise those wise men really were. But first, that when they first met the baby Jesus' mother, Mary and Joseph, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding joy. When they went into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures in the presence of his gold and frankincense and myrrh, they gave them to him. And being warned of God in a dream, they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. That's my mom's story. I'm sticking to it. I'm old and I'm not going to change it. So that was it. But you know, Christmas is all about being home with Jesus, having him in your heart, remembering your childhood and all the things of your home. The sweet aromas coming from your kitchen, the decorated trees, family all sitting around with chestnuts roasting on an open fire. We all have memories. And at this time of year, our memories should be filled with the times that bring smiles to our faces. Yes, Jesus brought joy to the world on that night. The promise of the scriptures was complete. The Savior had been born, who would bring new meaning into all our lives. He would be the guide and our inspiration, and our total light in total darkness. He would lead us to God and salvation. He truly brought joy to the world. Yes, Christ had come to save us from sin. And now we must, like the disciples, join John the Baptist and all the rest to spread the word. To shout it from the rooftops, from the highest mountains, that our precious Lord has come. It is our job to teach our children and everyone we meet that Jesus is here. He lives in your heart. I have a story that I want to end with today. It's a true story. For a single mom who was going to college, supporting her children completely alone, Christmas was looking pretty bleak. She looked around her little home and realization dawning like a slow twisting pain. She thought, we are poor. Their tiny house had 2 bedrooms, both off the living room. They were so small that her daughter's baby crib barely fit in one room, and her son's twin bed and dresser was squeezed into the other. There was no way they could share a room, so she made her bed every night on the living room floor. The 3 of them shared one closet. They were snug, to say the least, only a few feet from each other days and night. With no doors on the bedrooms, she could see and hear them at all times. Made them feel secure. And it made her feel close to them. A blessing, she said. She would not have had it any other circumstance. It was early in the evening, about 8 o'clock. Snow was falling softly outdoors. Silently, and her children were both asleep. She wrapped herself in a blanket. Sitting at the window, watching the powdery flakes flutter in the dimming light, when all of a sudden her front door vibrated with a pounding sound. Alarmed, she wondered who would stop by unannounced on such a snowy night. She opened the door to a group of strangers, grinning from ear to ear, their arms laden with boxes and bags. Confused, but finding their joyous spirit contagious, she grinned back at them. One of them said, "Are you Susan?" The man stepped forward as he held out a box for her. Nodding stupidly, unable to find her voice, she's sure they thought she was mentally deficient. "These are for you." The woman thrust another box at her with a huge beaming smile. Porch light and the snow falling behind her cast a glow over the dark air, lending her an angelic appearance. She looked down into the box. It was filled to the top with delicious treats. A fat turkey, all the makings of a traditional Christmas dinner. Her eyes filled with tears as realization of why they were there washed over her. Finally coming to her senses and finding her voice, she invited them in. Following the husband were 2 children staggering with the weight of their packages. Family introduced themselves. told her their packages were all gifts for her little family. This wonderful, beautiful family, who were total strangers to her, somehow knew exactly what they needed. They brought wrapped gifts for each of them, a full buffet for her to make on Christmas Day, and many extras that she could never afford. Visions of a beautiful, normal Christmas literally danced in her head. Somehow her secret wish for Christmas was materializing right in front of her. The desperate prayers of a single mom had been heard, and she knew right then and there that God had sent his angels to her. Her mysterious angels then handed her a white envelope, gave her another round of grins, took turns hugging her. They wished her a Merry Christmas and disappeared into the night as suddenly as they had appeared. Amazed and deeply touched, she looked around her at the boxes, the gifts strewn at her feet, and felt the ache of depression suddenly being transformed into childlike joy. She began to cry. She cried hard, sobbing tears of the deepest gratitude. A great sense of peace filled her. The knowledge of God's love was reaching into her tiny corner of the world. It enveloped her like a warm quilt. Her heart was full. She fell to her knees amid all the boxes and offered a heartfelt prayer. Getting to her feet, she wrapped herself in her blankets and sat once again to gaze out the window, the gentle falling snow. And suddenly she remembered the envelope. Like a child, she ripped it open. A shower of bills flittered to the floor. Gathering up, she began to count $5, $10, and $20 bills. As her vision blurred with tears again, she counted the money and recounted it to make sure that it was right. She said out loud, $100. She looked at her children sleeping soundly, and through her tears she smiled her first happy, free of worry smile for a long time.